every gray hair that you have on your head, right? That's the time that you spend with an SDR.
This question that you're asking me is one of the most important questions.
Always to the point with regards to how you frame your answer.
If you're going like this and talking like this, like, people don't want to hear it. But you got to slow down and really lure them in.
Don't water it down, right? Just answer as it is.
We've all gotten these long emails. No, they don't work, right?
One of the key things that I wanted to discuss with you today is who are the SDRs, in your opinion, that should be on the job? What is their character type? Where to find them? What is the SDR? Is this a career? Is it just the starting point in sales career, or SDR can be a career itself? And if you can speak into what people do you guys hire, and what is sort of like SDR in general for you guys, that would be perfect. So let's kind of start with, with the SDR. So sales development representative. So for my organization, right, SDRs are, or SDRs or appointment setters are individuals that excel in conversing with leads, qualifying them, and booking calls with those that are qualified and handing them over to the client. However, because of the niche of my business, my SDRs are 100% digital. So most of them are email SDRs or email appointment setters or LinkedIn appointment setters. So they don't need to have very strong sales skills, right? Because they are never on the phone. They don't talk on the phone, and they don't need to spend 1 minute to pass the gatekeeper and then get on the call with the client, make them interest, and then kind of package that conversation in a way that prospect would want to have a call later on, or a demo introductory call. So that's for me. So what is the SDR for you guys? If you have an SDR, because I've researched that you guys have telesellers or telesales, which is kind of different in a way.
No, we have SDRs. So we're the flip side of that coin, Michael. So we are call first, phone first, and email social complement, or a little bit of research. So to take us back a little bit, so I started SalesRoads 13 years ago. And the initial concept was to start a distributed sales outsourcing company where people work virtually, domestically or US based, across the country, but out of their home offices. So something that has become very popular recently.
Very handy, yeah.
And I was by no means the first person to do it, but it was pretty early that people were doing it in a non-centralized fashion. But I loved the concept because I had built they weren't called SDRs back then, but they're called, built inside sales teams that were generating pipeline. And I felt like this question that you're asking me is one of the most important questions, right? There's a lot that goes into strategy, building lists, tech stack, all those things to build a really high performing SDR team. But at the end of the day, it's people that are the engine. And so I love the idea of a distributed model because you could hire the best people wherever they live. They didn't have to just be in South Florida where I was living, or I was Philadelphia at the time. So, and what we found too, and this wasn't necessarily by design, but we found a lot of people who were applying for the jobs had significant sales experience. So they either had been doing full sales, they had been traveling, but they really didn't want to travel anymore. They loved the prospecting side of it. They were hunters. They just wanted to do that. Or maybe they had families they needed to take care of, and there was, part-time jobs, and so they wanted to work, but they had careers before and worked for a number of years. And so we've got this niche of really experienced salespeople who loved hunting, and doing cold calling and things like that. And so our SDRs have on average 14 years of sales experience. They're just later stage in their career. And they're not looking at SDRs as a stepping stone, which is to become an AE, which I think has become an issue in the industry, because a lot of folks come out of college. They start as an SDR because they feel like it's a stepping stone in their sales career, and it is a great stepping stone. It's a great way to learn about marketing and sales, right, and engaging and things like that. But they expect to be promoted, and so a lot of our clients have found that there's a revolving door, and they just get tired of hiring SDRs and promoting them or letting them go because they didn't work out. So we've really focused on people later stage in their career prior or have sales experience prior, and recruiting them and having them work for us. So that's our SDR in general.
So what is the minimum qualification level that you're looking at in your SDRs right now? Is it like you should have like 2-3 years of B2B experience working in the sales team? Is that the case or?
Yeah. So so you have to have a number of years of sales experience, and really preferably cold calling experience, just because it is, it's a certain type of skill.
Right.
And in our interview process, so we get hundreds of applications a week. I mean, it's just a lot, most of them don't have the right qualifications. We weed them out. And then we run them through a pretty robust process, where, they have certain types of assessments that they're taking, and then interviews that they do. And we do a lot of role play on the interviews, real time, just to see how they do. And then they go through and they graduate to our training process. And we have a pretty robust training. We call it RIOC, reaching right party contacts, initiating interest, overcoming objections, and confirming the close. So they go through that training before they then start calling on their first campaign. And through the training too, there's a little bit of assessment there, right? If they're really not able to master the skills, or we see that they didn't master, they get weeded out through that process as well through training.
We're going to talk about training in a minute. I wanted to go back to the hiring process, specifically through the interview process that you guys are taking. Since you're interviewing hundreds of applicants a week, did you see any patterns with regards to good SDRs and bad SDRs, or those that actually make the job, or those that fail? Again, just to put this into perspective, I've noticed that my SDRs, based on the nature of our business, should be introverts rather than extroverts. They should be multitaskers, so they need to handle a lot of different tasks, because they review the leads, work with the different email addresses, right, with different clients, with different ICPs, with different target buyers, right, with different templates, messages, follow-ups. So they need to be always multitasking, and they need to be very great in prioritization, right, and act fast and very sharp with regards to how they attack the problem, right? So these are things that I've noticed work. So you can imagine that if I am talking to an extrovert, like a very active extrovert, that very like my SDR should be very in depth with regards to how they consider the problems. And very often, that salespeople, we are very like everywhere and nowhere, basically, right? So you like talk, you like to meet, you like to be very sort of like emotional with some way, and sometimes you just skip the important stuff, right? So you don't listen, right? That's sort of like the bug for a lot of salespeople. So the SDR should be like opposite to that. So these are my patterns. Can you share any sort of like any patterns that you've seen within your kind of hiring process there, if you have any on top of your mind?
So there's a few things that we look for. First is curiosity, and really just asking a lot of questions, asking good questions, both because I think it shows a motivation, and in this job you've got to be really motivated and interested in what you're doing and want to do it. And so that level, one of our core values is attitude is everything. If somebody really wants to do this type of work and enjoys it and is interested in it, it's going to increase their probability of doing it well. So we really look for that type of interest and inquisitiveness in people who are applying for jobs. As far as the introvert and extrovert thing, it's interesting. We've seen it swing both ways, and I'm actually more introverted, and I'm very good at this type of stuff. But it's, so we haven't really screened out for the introvert versus the extrovert for our stuff. But it is an interesting type of thing, because you do think of salespeople as extroverted, and people who are on the phone as extroverted, but a lot of people who are introverted, because like you said, they listen better. They sometimes ask better questions and things like that. Another big thing that we look for is just tonality. I mean, when people, a lot of times in sales, you can convince people or engage people more with how you say something versus what you say. And we found some of the best SDRs that we have this slow, cadence and method, and they're almost reaching out through their headset and hugging the person on the other end. Somebody just wants to talk to them. So, we don't interview like with cameras or anything like that, because, the SDR functionality is all the way we do it is all over the phone. So we want that to be accurate. And that tonality and that cadence and that way of being able to say things in a certain manner really go a long way. And then not lastly, and we have a whole scorecard that we do things, but just a few high level things. But is because we are remote first, we do look for people who can self-motivate. They are, one of the downsides is you aren't in a room with a lot of other people, hearing people making sales, getting appointments and things like that. So we do look for that type of intrinsic motivation. Now we do a lot of things on Slack. We have a lot of contests. We have coaches who are reaching out to them, but it's different. It's different than when you are in a room together and get that self-motivation. And so going back to that whole attitude is, when people can motivate themselves to make that next call, to really keep after it, for 8 hours a day, that's a huge indicator of success. So those are a few things, Michael, that we look for.
Since you've been doing this for 13 years now, looking back at you when you were hiring those SDRs during your first few years, what are the most basic mistakes that you did that now you think of them and say, man, how I could think about this? Are there any sort of like mistake that you have on top of your head that you can share with me right now or with the listeners, like top 3 of your failed hiring of the SDRs, or not, so what not to do?
Yeah. So I think this is an important one, and it's going to be a little, I think, different than what you're expecting. But there are a number of times where we hired some amazing SDRs in the sense that they could book appointments. They could just really understand a person on the other side of the phone, give them an understanding of why they should book an appointment with our client, and their metrics were phenomenal. But they were a nightmare to manage. And they caused so many issues, especially when the company was smaller, with me calling me 11 o'clock at night, talking about what this issue is and why they need this and this problem. And then, disappearing for 2 days because they know that they're the best and they can do whatever they want and not really following some of the processes. And I would let it slide because they were just putting up numbers. But especially as we grew, and also for my own, as I started looking at all this gray hair, I realized you can't just hire people who are rock stars and hitting their numbers. You have to look holistically at how they fit into your organization and what they do to those around you. And I found, especially as I would have people who are managing them, they would take up all of the time of their managers, whereas they had to go and coach a whole bunch of other people, and their metrics would suffer because they're just focused on this one top person. And so we wouldn't hit campaign, that person would still be knocking it out of the park, but we wouldn't hit campaign quota because the resource was just drained. And we even lost one great manager because they couldn't deal with this person. And so I think sometimes we think, especially early stage, you have this rock star and they hold you hostage. Yeah. And I think companies have to be careful about that because you don't see the negative impact as clearly as to what they are doing and the problems they're creating outside of just them putting up those numbers.
This is golden, David. And I did make the same mistake during my first years, so I do kind of share this with you. For me, it was a sales rep rockstar, like closer, and I kept up with a lot of bullshit from that person. Sorry for my French there, just because he was an earner. But when I let him go, I was so relieved. So it was sort of like, and my team was more effective, to be honest with you. So on the long term, I actually get more and higher numbers, right? But having that anxiety every time that I spoke about, re-evaluating the compensation structure or the problem with certain call or, just within some internal arguments. So yeah, awesome. So anything else with regards to, like making those first mistakes when you hired your SDRs? Besides this one that comes to your mind right now?
Yeah, I think the other part is, and I think we're going to get to this in a little bit, is that just relying on hiring somebody who's great and just feeling like they're going to be able to do it. And I think a lot of companies, especially early stage, do it. They'll hire an SDR and then they'll just sort of let them, if they say you're great, go do it and figure it out. And it's a process. You've got to make sure you put the training in place for those people. You've got to put in the coaching in place. You've got to keep listening. And so just assuming that by hiring a great salesperson that everything is going to work out is usually the wrong strategy.
Right. How many interviews do you guys conduct before you make a final yes or send a job offer? Is there any like a series of interviews with the different people within the same company? And if there is, do you also have a sort of like an assignment or a test, like a writing test or a phone call that they need to make? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so we have a screening interview. And then just to make sure they've got, some of the basic right things, then they'll speak with our HR, our head of HR, and we ask them to prepare. We give them a bit of a script and some objections and a little bit of information about a fake company that they're expected to come and perform on the first interview. And then we have a second interview, which is the selection interview. So when the HR manager thinks they're good for a campaign, then the client service manager who heads up that campaign will do the final screening or the interview screening process before we pull the trigger.
So we talk about the way you look at the hiring. What about from the SDR standpoint? So why those experienced SDRs are accepting the job offers? Why they're joining your team? Do you have any? Can you talk to me about sort of the way you think about why those SDRs are interested in working for your organization? How do you package that in a sort of like in a way? How maybe you have some insights in terms of how the application should look like, so they are interested in, or it's appealing for them to, or about the job offer. Are there any sort of like points that you highlight for them that would make the difference for them to accept your job rather than joining some other agency or some other company?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. One, we've been in this space for a long time. And so I think people like that idea that they're joining a company that has really built up a good reputation and infrastructure for doing this. And that is distributed first. There are a number of other companies that are distributed at this point, but a lot are going to go back in 2021, to the office. And I think a lot of people do like the idea that they can do this job from their home office with a company that's been around for 13 years. We've also really worked hard to create a culture that is, that people are accountable to their numbers, but we also are very supportive. We invest a lot in the coaching, the training of our teams. We do a lot of fun types of things where we have bar nights and scout. We did those breakout rooms? What are those called? The breakout, the
what do you mean?
Locker rooms. Oh well, they'll come back to me. Okay. So, I think that it's really important to join a company where you can have some fun while you're doing what you're doing and have sort of an escape. The other thing is the flexibility that the job has. So, people do have the hours that they need to hit each week, and also obviously the number of appointments and their metrics. But we really don't, stipulate you've got to be in at this time or that time, so people can schedule what they need around their lifestyle and the things that they need to do, especially this year with all of the things at home that people have had to attend to and whatnot. And we've created this culture where I didn't even really push this or whatnot, but people call our team the SalesRoads family, right? So it's really, right. And a lot of people have never even met each other. So I think we've created something special in that regard that people want to, are attracted to, and want to come work for. So I think those are a few of the things. I think another thing is that really we exclusively promote from within. So we really do try to create a career progression for people who are interested in it. And so there are ways for people to move from SDR to basically a specialist who can jump from campaign to campaign, to a coach, to a client service manager, to a director level. So we really do provide that type of career trajectory for people. And so I think that that's also very appealing.
It is. From the business standpoint, and people that are listening to this also might be, thinking about, how do I pay my SDR, right? Because they're not sort of like closing, right? Because so they don't earn actually deals or clients. At the same time, they need to be motivated to hit their KPIs, right?
We try to keep it as simple as possible, just so people can see sort of what they're getting and they can calculate it themselves, pretty easily. So what we've done is we pay a good base, like you said, and then it's a straight commission per appointment. And it really depends on the difficulty of the appointment. So we work with our clients to figure out what quota is every month for the campaign. And then we break that down by the number of, reps who are on it. So they have their own individual quotas for that campaign and how many appointments they need to hit that month. And then we figure out what a reasonable set amount is for quota, for each appointment. And so, if you're booking, C-level appointments, it's going to be a lot bigger of a spiff or, a commission than if you're just booking manager level appointments. And we also take into account calling into technology is harder often than into the sales role, right? So to book appointments. So we have a behind the scenes calculator that we use to both create metrics for our clients so that they know what we think is achievable, and we can set team quotas. And then we break that down for each SDR. Now, the one kind of kicker that we do is we do have, we use this engagement platform called Crewhoo, and we can award what's called Crewhoo bucks. And so if you hit 100% of your quota in a month, you get a certain number of Crewhoo bucks, 150% and more, and 200% even more. And then those are redeemable for different prizes, whether it's, Amazon gift cards, Godiva chocolates, whatever you want to buy, just to, if you're hitting your quota or exceeding your quota.
With regards to promotion, you've mentioned that you have a promotional ladder for your SDRs. Can you speak to that? Because is it just they transition to another role, or they grow and are promoted within the SDR department, maintaining the same responsibilities, but just with different angle?
Yeah. So what they start as SDRs, and some people don't want to move up, they just want to be SDRs, and that's fine too. But for those folks who want to move up, so the progression is SDR. Then we have what's called our saucer. And that's somebody who will go in and out of different campaigns. So our SDRs are dedicated to one, tops two campaigns just to really learn the product. But the saucer will come in and out a bit. If we are struggling on a certain campaign, we'll bring them in just to sort of see what's working, what's not working. If it's an SDR issue, if it's a script issue. So they get to work on a whole bunch of different campaigns. And then we have you can get promoted to the TDM position, which is like our coach, talent development manager. Right. So they're the person who's managing the SDRs on a day-to-day basis, doing the training, the coaching, et cetera. And then there's the CSM, which is the client service manager. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones who work directly with the client. And then they work with the TDM to filter the client feedback and information back down. And then from there, we have our director levels, which is, head of program management, head of HR, head of marketing, head of sales, and then me.
Is the promotion being done organically? Like, okay, we have an available position, you're looking within, okay, this is the right person and he takes the job? Or there's a sort of like process, like every few SDRs, there should be one CSM, so that that every 5 SDRs, there should be one, and then you just grow that more in the more sort of mathematical order, or it's more just sort of like the organical thing?
Yeah, so we just rolled out this new org chart last January. So it's a little bit new, and with this year, which was an interesting year, and we weren't as strategic about it, but is one of the things that we really do need to do, and we thought about. We know about how many SDRs one TDM can manage, how many campaigns one CSM can manage, but we haven't done as good a job. And as we go into planning in December, that's one of our key objectives, is to do a little bit more planning, to be more proactive in those promotions.
Got it. You touched based on training already. So can you talk to me about your training? So how much time would it take for you guys to ramp the SDR up? Is it like a month?
Well, so we do training initial training is a week to go through the ROIC training, which are different modules for the different parts that we think are important for an SDR. Then they get trained on the campaign. So we do an in-depth training on that with role play, and then they launch. And then over the course of the first month, we're really working, even more closely on a day-to-day basis with coaching and whatnot. But we do think it's important, if you just do a month of just sort of training without really getting into it and trying things and whatnot, we don't think it's as effective. But we have a really good process, both because a lot of these folks have done this before, and it's not like we're just starting with somebody out of college, but then to indoctrinate them into our processes, and then really for them to understand the campaign they're working on, it's a week-long training process.
Got it. I know that getting SDR to the same level and having that sort of like foundation to be educated is one thing, right? Because you always, hire and train SDRs, so you probably need to have a very strong process for that. However, one of the challenges that we face internally on how to upgrade the SDRs to the next level, because very often when you start working with clients, what you do, you're focusing on the client side, how to deliver the KPIs, so that quarter passed or a year passed, and you get to the point where you have a lot of senior SDRs, but they stop growing with regards to, or you can't offer them certain training. Did you have, or do you have the same challenge? And if you have, how do you solve this challenge internally?
Yeah, I think the way that we've solved it, which I think is one of the competitive advantages for agencies versus internal, as far as keeping SDRs in the role and keeping it interesting, is just changing campaigns. So, people will be on a campaign for many months, sometimes a year or two, and then they'll just raise their hand and say, listen, can I try something new? And absolutely, right? And so, I think that's one big thing, just being able to work on a new product, new service, and whatnot. But then we're always thinking of new ideas to do what we're doing better, and rolling out different ways to get, the right person on the phone, or, a different type of way of handling an objection. And so we try to roll out those types of training modules, throughout the year. But I think the most important thing to keep things fresh and to keep people challenged is to allow them to try something different in a different campaign. With
different clients, right? That's what you're saying. Okay, that makes sense. Did you bring any external consultant or training coach or whatever to train some of those hard or soft skills for the team? Have you ever done any external training?
We haven't. There is somebody that I've worked with, and he's a good friend of mine, Tom Stearns, who I will reach out to and talk about some processes and things like that. He's the closest thing to an external coach. As far as the training stuff, we've really just built it internally, just from what we've learned, what we see works, what we've tested, and it's just one of our core competencies is training our team.
Are you using any particular tool for this that you can recommend?
Talent LMS is the one we use, which we've found has worked really well. Has really good ways of doing testing, managing multiple, because sometimes we'll have a whole series of training modules, and so they can go through it in different paces. So it's been really good for us, Talent LMS.
Cool. Two quick questions for you, and we can move on to a next topic. When you look at the training that you've done so far in retrospective, right, managing and training a lot of SDRs, what is the number one mistake that most of them do when they go through the training, or some of or a shtick that you guys have within your training that you highlight specifically because that works? Can you give us a tip or?
Yeah. So I think with the with the SDRs, I think that the biggest thing that we see, and we even see it with people who've done it for a long time. I even was doing it. I like to get on the phones sometimes and just keep my chops strong. And I hadn't done it for a little bit, and then I sort of caught myself. And it goes back to some of the things that we look for in the interview, and it's rushing the pitch. We do have a script, but you don't want to sound scripted, and you've got to create a cadence for how you're saying something that's methodical, and slower is better, because you kind of bring somebody in as you're, if you're going like this and talking like this, people don't want to hear it. Right. Whereas if you're really talking to them and, giving them this a little bit of a lower pitch and like bringing them into the conversation, just when somebody speaks in a certain way versus another person, their metrics can improve. And so we've seen people, and it's partly because they get nervous, but it's really important for them to really learn this, during training, or think about it during training, because they'll sometimes go an hour without talking to somebody, and then they get someone on the phone, and then they'll get nervous, and then they'll just zip through it. But you got to slow down and really lure them in. And it's really the number one issue. And I was cold calling a month ago, and I wasn't having success. And I was like, what am I doing? And I just thought about one of my top SDRs and how she just has this calm cadence. I was like, David, slow down, buddy. And then I just started booking appointments. And it's so simple, but so tough to do, because you feel like you just got someone cold. You don't have that much time. You want to get everything out that you have to say. Yeah. And it's the opposite of what you should be doing.
This is golden, David. Just to add to this, one of the things that I've noticed by training my SDRs or SCs and AEs as well is many people that just start stepping to this role, even though if they have some experience, they often have this pitch or script or whatever that they know how to answer a certain way, but very often they don't answer the exact question how it is framed. And what I notice is that the more experience you have, the more to the point you are. So very often when you went through like 4,000 calls or 5,000 calls, you're always to the point with regards to how you frame your answer, right? You never water down at all. You just to the point, and so that within a short period of time, you can answer more questions, get more valuable information. And those to the point answer always sort of like, are remembered by the client more than whether sort of just the dialogue as well, because you can give more numbers, more facts, right? And I always say that whenever you have an email or you're on the phone or you answer a question, don't water it down, right? Just answer as it is, right? Be very to the point, and people will appreciate this, you being professional with this. So, and I've noticed this.
Absolutely. Less is more, in both, emails where you guys are really experts. We've all gotten these long emails. No, they don't work, right? You got to, probably that person spent so much time writing this long email, but you got to distill it in just a few sentences, which is tougher, right? And sometimes that even takes more time, because you got to figure out what's most important. And with a call approach, the same thing. You've got just a small amount of time to really be able to point out the most important things you want to get across.
Can you answer this? Whenever I, get a, registered on a certain website, or, whenever someone is trying to sell me specifically, over the phone, they are very persistent. They call me like, I declined the call because I'm in the meeting. They call. So what is the level of persistence that you feel those SDRs or SCs should have? And where is too much, right? Where is like, okay, just don't do that, or give someone a breath? Yeah.
So it is a little bit of an art more than a science. I've found, but I think that it's overall polite persistence. So basically, our basic metric is that we try to touch somebody and call into somebody about 7 times over the course of a month, and then we let it rest. Now, depending on the list size or the level, that can go up slightly or down slightly. But about 7 times we feel is the magic number. Now, within one time, if we really feel, especially during this day and age, it's important to get direct lines or even cell phones if you can, and trying to dial through each of them. That doesn't count as sort of a touch. You sort of try to dial each of them, but then you follow up about 7 times and then let it rest.
Got it. Okay. I've a few days ago, I talked to this rude sales guy that was, super annoying. So he called our office line. I pick up the phone, and he called back because one of my colleagues registered on their website for a product or a service, right? And I declined call a few times, but then I pick up the phone, I talk to him, and he like, I am looking for Vlad. And I was like, sorry, Vlad is in the meeting. He's not available. Okay, when he will be available? I was like, he's in the meeting. I don't know. This is office line. Can you give me his phone number? And he's super persistent, but not like persistent in the way that he's polite, but he's more like annoying. He didn't feel the vibe, right? And it was super frustrating. And after this call, I went to my colleague and say, Vlad, never work with those guys again, because that guy just pissed me off. And that's...
It's totally. And so one of the things we train on that's really important, when you do call into the main number, the magic words, if you're trying to reach somebody, and again, it's all this stuff, it's just the simplicity of it. It's, can you help me? You don't demand something, right? Can you help me? And it's in a nice, pleasant way, asking somebody for help. And the response rate is so much higher, if you're just asking somebody for help, in a nice, polite way.
Can you kind of just summarizing all the work that you did over the past 13 years, can you give a recommendation to an SDR or a person that wants to be an SDR or do the job? Recommendation can be with regards to how you can advance in the career, how you can be more effective. Any sort of recommendation that you can just, 1 or 2 recommendation that you have on top of your mind that could be, powerful for those folks.
Yeah. So I'll go back to the interview questions. And I think if somebody's trying to advance in this career, the most important thing is curiosity, and both curiosity about the prospects that you're calling into. So what is it that is challenging them on a day-to-day basis, right? What are the things that are keeping them up at night that your product or service can help them with? And then when you speak to them, really asking some of those questions, really understanding who they are. And if you approach it with that mindset of curiosity, everything else starts to fall into place, because it gives off that vibe. You're trying to help them solve a problem. So that's the first part of curiosity. The second part is, things have changed so much in the last 13 years. We're in the SDR outsourcing business. I don't think the term SDR even existed in 2007, right? We did very similar types of things, right? But it didn't exist, and we didn't do it. LinkedIn was just a concept at that point, right? So things are always evolving, changing, different ways. There's going to be great ways that we're going to generate appointments and leads, from both of our companies a year from now or 2 years ago that we just never even thought of before, right? So if you're curious and always trying to learn and see what's new and what's out there, you're going to keep developing and doing things in a better way and helping your organization by challenging yourself and them to think that way.
Perfect, David. And then the second question is, what will be your recommendation for the people that are hiring or building the SDRs, or for those entrepreneurs that are thinking about building their SDR force? Any sort of recommendation that you can share with those folks? Yeah.
So I think if you want to do it, invest in it. Find somebody who really owns it, and it can't, a lot of times this functionality is an afterthought. People know it's important, but they kind of throw it on top of the marketing person, marketing manager. They throw it on a sales ops person, or maybe it's part of what the VP of sales is now challenged to do. And without the type of attention and dedication to making it work, it's going to fail. And it's so important, both in generating new business, but also learning about your prospects. I mean, the SDR functionality is on the front lines. It's talking to prospects every day. So you're going to learn what they need, what they want, what they don't want. That SDR is going to be the first person to learn it. So really take it seriously, invest in it. Make sure that if you're doing it internally, it is really part of someone's accountability, and it's not just thrown on top of their existing accountabilities, that it's really, they have time to really focus on it and make it work. Otherwise, it will fail.
I agree with you there 100%. Without dedication, investment, and time and A/B testing, right, you cannot build a cake, right, or create or cook a cake or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Bake a cake, right? Okay, awesome. Perfect. Listen, David, it's been really great. I appreciate you taking the time. I think that we definitely need to spend 1 minute talking about your company and when, for everyone that is listening to this, if they have a need, right? Can you sort of like explain when those people needs to get in touch with you and why they need to talk to you? So what kind of need or challenge they should have within their organization that they can solve with your company, with your business?
Yeah. So, at SalesRoads, we really focus on SDR outsourcing for our clients. And so really, there are two types of companies that we've really had tremendous success with, and both stem from the concept where they weren't able to, dedicate enough time internally. They don't have that person who can manage it, and they're looking for a partner to develop that SDR team for them. And so the two types of companies that we really help most are early stage technology companies that are really growing very quickly. They have some AEs, they want to really increase pipeline for those AEs, increase discovery calls, and they just don't have the bandwidth to manage it internally. So we work a lot with those companies, really helping them to accelerate revenue. And then there's a lot of other companies, more in that have been around for a long time. They had a really good outside sales team. They really know how to sell through distributors, things like that. And they just have never built an inside sales team before, and really don't have that core competency. So they look to us to centralize that for them and build out their SDR team, inside sales team for their outside sales reps.
So you go to SalesRoads.com, you registered on an introductory call or consultation, and then your team will take them for the journey from there, right?
That's right. Well, we will have a robust beginning to the relationship, where we'll figure out a demand playbook for you and figure out how to create pipeline for your team.
Perfect. David, it's been really great. I appreciate you taking the time. You and your family have great Thanksgiving. I'm not sure when this goes live, but we are recording this right before the Thanksgiving. So I appreciate you for this. It's been really, really great. And it's been a pleasure talking to you, David.
Same here, Michael. Thanks for having me on.